I know it wasn't the only one that envisioned some big things for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2014, coming off of a 10-6 season where they won the division. You're looking at it and you're saying, oh, the NFC East is going to be really weak. This team is going to cakewalk to the divisional title. They'll probably even cakewalk to a first round bye, if not home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And it just didn't materialize. It's not like the Eagles were terrible. But, Nick Foles didn't quite have the same season in 14 as he did in 13. And then once he went injured, Mark Sanchez was, what you'd expect out of Mark Sanchez. I mean, they still went 10-6, so it wasn't a totally lost season. But ultimately, you either make the playoffs or you don't. And 10-6 wasn't good enough to get into the playoffs in the NFC as a wild card in 2014. And, frankly, if you're losing to RG3 and the Washington Redskins in the second to last week of the season, you probably don't deserve to make the playoffs any damn ways. That's just the truth of the matter. And you look at the Eagles, and there's reasons for people to be excited about the Eagles and their potential in 2014 and maybe excited about it in 2015. After the horrible misses of the 2010 draft class led by Brandon Graham and the 2011 draft class led by Danny Watkins, oh God, this is a team that's hit with multiple picks in the past few drafts. You're looking at 2012, their first and second round picks, and Fletcher Cox and Michael Kendricks have both been solid players. You look at 2013, a pretty weak draft class, but they did pretty well for themselves with Lane Johnson in the first round and Zach Ertz in the second round. You look at 2014, Jordan Matthews was a nice steal in the second round, and maybe a Josh Huff will produce more. So after a couple of draft classes where they just absolutely got nothing, and hence why 2012 was such a bad season for the team, you look at 2012, 13, 14, they've been able to pluck out a couple of key contributors in each of those drafts, and that really helped. Now, it would help if they got absolutely anything at all out of their 2014 first-round pick, Marcus Smith. But again, this is a team whose talent cupboard isn't all of that bare, and we knew heading into this offseason was probably going to be pretty proactive, especially with Roseman taking a back seat because Chip Kelly was able to outpower play him and take over personnel and decision-making power. And lo and behold, we just didn't know how aggressive and how active Chip Kelly was going to be in free agency and in this offseason. He went into full-fledged Madden mode. He traded LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso. He traded Nick Foles and a couple of better picks to the Rams for Sam Bradford and a couple of worse picks. He signed DeMarco Murray and Ryan Matthews in free agency to replace LaShawn McCoy. He brought in Byron Maxwell and Walter Thurman to help address their glaring void in the secondary. This is a guy that made a lot of moves via trade, via free agency, to address what he thought were some of the weaknesses of this team. And apparently Chip Kelly trying to put in the Chip Kelly way, the Oregon way, if you will, in Philadelphia. And we'll ultimately see, time will tell how those moves work out. But the work is not done, and now we're going to see what really matters out of Chip Kelly the most. He's going to be the personnel guy. He's going to be the guy calling the shots. Well, the most important thing you can do is be successful in the NFL draft. You can talk about trades, you can talk about free agency, but at the end of the day, if you don't hit on the draft, you're not hitting on any freaking thing. So what are some of the biggest things that the Eagles need to address in this year's draft? Well, first and foremost, if they're counting on Sam Bradford and Mark Sanchez to be the answer at quarterback, they're kidding themselves. They need a quarterback, plain and simple. Now, was Sam Bradford acquired as a potential trading chip to go up and get a guy like Marcus Mariota? Perhaps. But either way, they need a quarterback. They do not have a franchise quarterback. I don't understand why they would bring in Sam Bradford otherwise, because to me, he's less of a systematic fit than Nick Foles. And not only that, he was older, even more injury-prone, and more expensive. Just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. It's quite remarkable, actually, over the past 2 years that the Eagles have won 10 games, considering their situation at quarterback. And now they've added Sam Bradford into the mix because that worked out so well for the Rams over the past 5 years. Right? What else do they need? They could use some help on offense as well, namely inside at the guard position. Part of the problem for this Eagles team, especially early on in the year, a team that's so predominantly dependent upon the running game for what Chip Kelly likes to do with his offense, they had struggles in their run blocking, all throughout the season, especially early on. All the injuries that they had exposed the lack of depth they had on the offensive line, in particular the interior. You had injuries. You had Lane Johnson's 4-game suspension for PED use to start the season. I mean, this was a team that was hurting in a bad way on the offensive line, and they still, I think, are hurting in a bad way on that offensive line, so it would behoove them to spend a pick at some point in time trying to address some depth on that offensive line. They could also use more at wide receiver. You know, you've got Jordan Matthews, who I really like. I think Josh Huff will contribute a little bit more in year two. But, you know, Riley Cooper, you've let Jeremy Maclin go. They could use another weapon, another threat on the outside. And that's why some people, perhaps, if they don't have them taking a quarterback at number 2 by trading up, have them perhaps taking a wide receiver at that 20th overall selection. They could use some help still on defense. I still think they need help at the edge rush position. They cut Trent Cole in the offseason, and you've replaced him with Brandon Graham, who's never really panned out and never really fit that 3-4 system, and a guy in Marcus Smith who didn't fit anywhere and didn't do a damn thing in 2014. They could definitely use some depth and talent at the edge rush position opposite Connor Barwin. They could use some depth on the defensive line, particularly at the end position, with Cedric Thornton about to hit free agency next season and Fletcher Cox about to in another year or two. You know, you might not be able to keep both of those guys because of the salary cap situation you're in based off of the money they might command. So it might behoove this organization to get them some young depth there. And with all the addressing that they did of the secondary in the offseason, most notably at the cornerback position, Nate Allen, who is bad in and of himself, is gone. They need help at the safety position in a very bad way, and I would expect this team to understand that and spend an early round pick on there. In terms of their philosophy for this year's draft, who knows what the fuck to expect with Chip Kelly? It's all speculation at this point in time because this is going to be his first draft really truly running the show, so we don't know. We can think we know based off of rumors and innuendos and discussion and talking points that are thrown out there, but we don't know. He could be going all in to get Marcus Mariota. He could believe that that's his guy. He could believe that that's the perfect guy to run his system at the NFL level. He could believe that this is the guy that he needs to take this team to the next level and help them win a championship. And maybe that's why he's been so active in the trade market and in free agency, because he figures that he needs to address some team needs there because he's going to have to give up a lot of draft pick compensation in order to move up from 20 to 2 to get a guy like Mariota. That might be the philosophy. The philosophy might be that he actually believes that Sam Bradford is his guy and he's fucking insane, and therefore he's going to try and build around him. They could sit there and just go best player available at pick 20. Who knows? They could decide to address the offensive side of the ball, either with an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, which I think would be very wise at pick number 20. Or they could have no clue and no real philosophy and no real game plan and leave everybody scratching their heads. We don't know. We'll find out in a couple of weeks. But right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are one of those real wild card teams in this 2015 NFL draft because they could go in any number of different directions, from great to good to bad to, oh my God, Matt Millen bad.